So yeah, we're excited to present our project with everybody today. This is our Timber Ridge Affordable Housing Project in LeGrand, Oregon. If you want to go ahead and roll with the slides, Nate. I'll get into some introductions here in just a second, but I wanted to kind of reiterate the learning objectives for today. So I've got them here. I'm not going to necessarily read them all out loud, but really what we want to capture in our discussion today is about how we really focused on the user experience and interactions and how the project connects with community. We also utilize trauma-informed design principles that are key to what we feel like is the success to the project. And in general, what we practice in our firm on most projects or all projects. And then we also had some pretty major energy efficiency goals on this project as well. So Nate's going to dive into some of the technical aspects with you here in just a minute. And then just really utilizing multiple benefits with everything that we do, really capturing efficiency in our budget and making sure that everything is considered from a long-term durability standpoint, from a user experience standpoint, and really thinking holistically about the project. So I'm Andrea Wallace, if you want to switch slides, Nate. I'm Andrea Wallace. I'm one of the principals at Inkville Architecture. My pronouns are she, her. And with me today is Nate Ember.
Dale, I'm Nate, one of the other principals here, he, him pronouns.
And we're principals of Inkville Architecture. If you go to the next slide, this will give you a picture of our team. And we're what I would describe as a mission focused firm set to redefine the potential design through realizing affordability, sustainability, and social equity in the built environment. We really do feel like the success of our projects is about the relationships that we build and about the people that we serve and not about profits. So we really run our firm in that way. We have a deep commitment to sustainability. That's actually how we all met working at a design build firm previously that was really highly focused on sustainable building strategies. And we think that design should be accessible and affordable to all people, and especially those who have had the least access to it. In all of our projects, we want to empower people to really live their best lives, and we want to protect the planet in the process, and that all design should be functional, beautiful, and beyond everything else, we just want to create spaces for health and healing. So that's a little bit about us. We were founded in 2017, and we are a certified women-owned business. And as you can see, we are actually a team of mostly women. Um, Go to the next slide, Nate. We'll kind of get into some of the context of this project.
Yeah, thank you. So we this project is located in LeGrand, which is the ancestral land and unceded territory of the Umatilla, Cayuse, Yakima, and Walla Walla people. And so obviously, the everything we do to develop land is part of the colonial project, and so it's not done. We're all still part of it, and so we understand that there's no perfect way out of it, and so just to be thoughtful about the deep wisdom that made this place, this whole region of the Northwest that we love so much, beautiful as it is and sustainable for millennia, was a wisdom that we don't have because we're already kind of messing it up. We've already polluted the water, the air, in just a few hundred years. So there's certainly a lot of wisdom we need to gain back from the elders and people who inhabited this land and took care of it for so long and are still here trying to do that. And so our practice is really just trying to figure out how do we weave in more reciprocity, restraint, thinking, that 7 generations thinking, so that what we're doing now is hopefully going to be moving towards a regenerative future and not one where we're just doing more bad, a little bit less bad. So this project was a incredible opportunity to work with a developer who shares a lot of our values, community development partners, gave us just a ton of room to just kind of run with this project. They trusted us, paired us with a project manager who's kind of an idealist and optimist, and asked a lot of great, like, kind of what if questions, and also really allowed us to listen to our ultimate client, which is the housing authority, who's the long-term owner for the project. And they're the owner and operator of this affordable housing. And so really was just like we were empowered to listen to them and try to build a project that met their needs and hopefully exceeded them. The community in La Grande is tightly knit. There's fantastic, you know, groups of people who are already providing shelter, taking care of folks in from all sorts of backgrounds. So these folks were kind of engaged at the very beginning and throughout design. We had a partnership with the Center for Public Interest Design at PSU, who did a lot of kind of asset-based community engagement, which really is a practice of understanding what's already here, what's the value that we can build upon and support rather than trying to reinvent or ignore. And so that's really what they did is helped us connect to a lot of these service providing folks in the community, and many of which wanted to have had clients, people they serve that need housing. So that's part of what this housing project was going to do, is offer units that their folks could come into. So people who have AIDS, or people aging out of foster care, or people, you know, coming back from incarceration, and seniors, all kinds of folks understood the needs that were there. And so this project was going to attempt to try to make, you know, inclusive space for them. And so, yeah, there are many great partners, as most of these affordable housing projects do. They rely heavily on great partnerships from everybody, from city to county to, you know, state funders, and the developers and the contractors and architects. And so in this case, we also have an on-site daycare, Head Start daycare. So the folks in purple there are, they were really excited. Everybody from Eastern Oregon University's Head Start program showed up and supported the project at the groundbreaking. So we had many of those. And one just interesting thing that challenged this project, we won't go, you know, too deep into the specific context, because issues, because we want this to be, you know, as applicable to other folks and other sites as possible. But the site we got for this project is really kind of located here. You see the site highlighted here on the sort of northeast side of I-84. And if you've driven by La Grande, Oregon, you kind of know that the main part of town is over here, kind of tucked in against the mountains. And so the site was kind of far away from most of what's going on in town. Doesn't have great transit access, doesn't have a whole lot of amenities, walkability, or any of that stuff. So that was one of the major things we understood from the beginning, is that folks needed to be well served on the site, and that there was certain things we were just going to need to take care of, and understanding that there is also a little kind of a neighborhood here, which I'll get to in a minute, that also kind of needed some additional support and spaces. So the other greatest asset, in addition to the tight-knit community, is of course the nature. The Grand Ronde Valley is surrounded on all sides by mountains, so it's pretty much a 360 view of nature. And so that is probably the greatest asset of the site, that we really kind of looked to for inspiration throughout the design process. But it was basically a brown, or not a brownfield, it really was a greenfield site. Hadn't been developed. It was a farm field that got brought into the urban growth boundary, zoned for their high density residential, but it's out on the far edge of town. So there was some kind of planning issues with that, in our opinion, but you know, that's okay. It's what we have, and it's what allowed us to build this great housing. And so we just really needed to understand those constraints. Here it is a little bit closer. And so there's some industrial and like storage stuff along a couple of sides, and then the other sides are a lot of manufactured housing and other kind of naturally occurring affordable housing. So that's part of what I was talking about is this is a neighborhood that really could benefit from what's going on this site, along with the amenities we're trying to make for the direct residents. So that was part of our considerations too. And yeah, here's just some views from when we first started the project, standing in the middle of this sort of abandoned farm field um, on a wintry day, but you can just kind of see that there's just mountains and sky in all directions. So it's pretty cool site. And then I'll hand it back to Andrea to talk a little bit more about the design.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, as a firm, we practice and focus on trauma-informed design. You guys have probably seen a very similar kind of diagram before. You'll notice on ours, we added kind of two pedals to the wheel, one being biophilia and another being an inclusion. And those are all of these kind of principles are ones that we brought into this project. We really take a human-centered approach as much as possible and focus on community engagement and community integration. And you'll see as we kind of go through the design, I'm going to kind of hopefully go fairly quickly through some of the slides, but you're going to see how that kind of played out in some of the decisions that we made on site. We also are true passionate believers in color and the use of color. I think often we really love the sleek white and black and gray and modern design, but we really feel like communities thrive with integration of color, and it often has some really good impacts. And we also believe in kind of integrating art into the projects as well. And that's often where you'll see most of the pops of color is through the artwork and murals. But like nature, art has a very similar emotional and physical response to or humans have a similar physical response to looking at art as they do nature. It helps lower your blood pressure, helps calm your stress, lower your cortisol levels, and so taking that same vein of trauma-informed design and integrating art into almost all of our projects is something really important to us, and this in this case is no different. We also believe in the power of biophilia and integrating nature into the spaces that we create, whether that be through actual vegetation and natural elements, or even just the use of natural materials. Often making sure that we're putting wood and materials that in specific places where people are coming into contact with them. And similar to what I just spoke about with art, it does help both cognitively, it helps with our physical well-being, and psychologically kind of restoring our sense of tranquility and connection. If you want to keep going, Nate. So when we first started approaching our site design and concept design on this project, we had been looking at a couple different typologies of housing. But one thing we knew was that we were going to really try to move away from a double loaded corridor building. And as Nate mentioned at the beginning, we had an opportunity to meet with several nonprofit organizations. And some of those, as he said, were folks coming out of incarceration. It's also folks aging out of the foster care system. It's veterans. It's a number of different communities that would be served potentially on this site. And so safety and that kind of the trauma-informed piece, absolutely, but really focusing on safety and user experience and how we can create spaces that all of these people can coexist was really informative from the very start. Um, and you're going to see as we move forward, the lower kind of more contoury site plan is the one that was ultimately selected. And it allowed us to stitch in a lot of really great common spaces because, as they also mentioned, from a contextual standpoint, we had a lot of single family residential houses around us. But as you saw in the map, there's really nothing within walking distance when it comes to parks. There's a lot of open field and just, privately owned land, but nothing that's programmed, nothing that had any like true park or access to nature for folks to utilize. And so the Housing Authority really wanted this to be that for the community, not just for the community that it's serving on site, but for the greater community. So this kind of contouring, meandering site plan allowed us to kind of stitch in a multitude of spaces that really helped kind of engage and activate the site. We also were thinking of this idea of exercise and physical health. So there's actually a walking loop that's on site that gives you a safe space to kind of walk throughout, as well as stitching together those little mini parks, if you will, throughout the space. And that's all internal, not necessarily utilizing the kind of public sidewalks, but also having those kind of interior paths for people to walk, and then also providing little instances of nature play areas or kind of more natural workout areas for people to experience. Um, I'm going to show some photos of the site experience here in just a second, but stitching in the landscaping with how you experience that walking path. So here's a photo of that walking path. There's a place to rest, like a bench. There's logs and rocks for kids to play on and experience. And on the corner here, you're seeing kind of a dry creek bed that's really meant as a conveyance for stormwater. But during the summer months, it also can be a place for children to play when it's not flowing water. So if you go to the next slide, it kind of shows those two conditions where in the wet months, you're going to see water in that little creek bed and it's going to come down to a stormwater swale at the edge of the property. Whereas during the summer months or the drier months, it allows for places to play and is just a really beautiful amenity on the site. Access to nature is really important. From a user experience. And sometimes that's also just a place to be able to like step outside and let your dog go to the restroom or let your kids run around right outside your front door. And often apartments are left with parking lots right at their front door or right at their back door. And so we wanted to make sure that we were stitching in green spaces between the buildings and the parking areas. And it was also really important. Oh yeah, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So you can kind of see some of those green spaces. Unfortunately, this is kind of in the fall months as the lawn is starting to go dormant. But there's kind of some dog park areas. There's a big lawn for kids to play in. There's a pickleball court. There's a nature play area. You're seeing the pad over there for a playground that isn't quite, oh, I don't know what just happened. Um, Strange. There's a pad over kind of at the side there that's for a playground that's not quite installed yet in the photo. And then you're also seeing those white roofs are covers over the carport area. That's actually a requirement from LeGrand. They get quite a bit of snow there, and they have in their zoning code requirements for ensuring that a certain percentage of the parking is covered. And I'm going to talk about the building forms here in just a second, but I just want to call it out on this kind of aerial image as well. We kind of focused on creating roof lines that harnessed solar access. So Nate will get into kind of the technical aspects of some of those items here in a bit, but just wanted to kind of call that out while we we're on this photo. If you go to the next slide. So as Nate mentioned, this kind of access to nature is one of the most primary resources of inspiration for the project. If you click, you'll kind of see we actually kind of took this idea of the ridge line of the mountain range around the project, and that directly influenced what we started thinking about as far as building forms and masses and roof lines. So those kind of top two forms were where we were already starting from a concept standpoint at looking at bringing in the kind of wood and timber elements and creating these kind of folding roof lines that are inspired by the mountains around it. And then this is kind of a direct Revit model of how that played out for the project. This is building type 1. There's 4 different building types on the site, and that's also kind of important because we didn't want it to feel like this was just copied and pasted around, even though you'll see that the building types do repeat on the site. It was kind of important to us that they all had like a slightly different scale, a slightly different feel, and their roofs kind of meandered in a way that made it feel like it's stitched into the landscape around it and into the context more naturally. This is kind of an overall plan of the building. As you're seeing here, there's two levels for building type 1 and 3. In one of the building types, we actually have a townhouse unit. So it's a flat on the ground floor and then it's a stacked townhouse above. So we do have one unit type that's actually technically 3 stories. And I'll show you that in photos here. So you can see that here where you can't quite tell from the street level that it's a 3-story building, but it actually has that like unit 216 and 215 that you're seeing the front doors for there are actually townhouse units that are up above the flat of 115 and 116. And so as you can see, that stitch of landscaping area where, folks can stand outside, watch their kids play, and really activate the ground floor space. And then we provided pops of color with the wood tone, the kind of gray buildings and the wood accents, but providing pops of color at the front doors as kind of a way of wayfinding, but also a way to just really brighten the building.
And I'll just add a couple of pieces about this kind of overall design approach to the site and the buildings that came from both, trauma-informed perspective, but our client in the grant didn't even, utilize those kinds of terminologies, but she would talk about the livability of like being in a place where it snows and what does a single mom do trying to move groceries and kids from car to house, and like how do you make sure that's safe and that you have a direct line of sight, and how do you make sure that if you're not getting along with a certain neighbor, somebody might be a little bit hostile, how do you have more than one way to get in and out, or like, not creating pinch points. So there was just a lot of thought going into this kind of balcony approach design, single loaded building, so that people had more views, more visibility, more choice. So that was really kind of a fundamental piece.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, I was gonna speak to kind of that same thing here where I was ultimately the parking lot, as you can kind of see, if you were to park your car, you actually can see all the front doors for that building basically from the exterior. And you don't have, even though the stairs are sometimes even rotated and tucked into the building a little bit, or here you're seeing it kind of parallel with the balcony edge. Um, it's very well lit, and you can kind of see everything there, and you don't have like a door tucked back behind a stairwell that often happens in a lot of other kind of the woody walk-ups that we see all over the place. So it was really important, that safety and that aspect of really making sure that everybody felt safe here, and could have eyes on the street and access to daylight, as Nate said, was critical. So this is another one of the building types. So you're seeing a much smaller kind of building here than the other one. Fewer unit types, but it also yeah, fewer unit types on this building. But you're also seeing it kind of stitches, because of the different sizes of the buildings, we're able to stitch them more organically and create that kind of contour or meandering path, both from a pedestrian experience and a vehicular one. That also, I didn't mention it in the site plan, but that's also a really natural way to slow traffic, versus having one long stretch of drive aisle or one long stretch of parking. We really wanted to make it so you had to kind of maneuver through the site and slow traffic down, because we wanted to make sure that all of those connection points across the site to these different little park areas or play areas were well protected. They're slow. They have kind of crosswalks indicated. And as you can see, even here at the front of the building, utilizing just rock and large logs become a place for people to sit, a place to gather, a place to play, but they also are just aesthetically nice landscape decoration. And again, this is kind of speaking to, even in as it starts to get darker on the site, you're seeing that stairwell really well lit, and you're seeing the building where you can still get visual access to your front door. Um, And then this is also just user experience of what it's like under that walkway, utilizing natural materials where they're more directly in relation to where a person might be. So you're seeing the timber elements that really carry through the entire building, but also bringing that wood on the soffit and on the siding, where it's really well protected from the elements. So there's less maintenance on the wood itself, but also just it's where that human experience is along the sidewalk that you get that softer, more natural material. And then one of the things that I've mentioned to my team when we are doing CA, the phase one of the project, they actually built the project in two phases, and phase one was complete, and folks were kind of moving in as we were wrapping up phase two. And one of the coolest experiences is actually seeing people just already living there. And it was really fun to witness, the kids parking their tricycles right outside their front door, and seeing the project come to life and seeing the users kind of starting to take over the space and starting to really engage in it and activate it. Is just super rewarding. These projects take, years from the time that we start talking about them, or even even further for the development team when they start getting funding, to the point where we're actually seeing people move in. And so, watching the trikes get parked that day was like, we're almost there. We're almost finally at the end. So it's a really special moment. So I had to include that photo. And then I wanted to provide a photo of just kind of the upstairs walkway, which has got a very similar experience to the downstairs. We did still try to maintain as much protection. This upper roof, you can't quite see it. It's got a little bit higher roof line, but you're still getting that pop of color at the door. You're still getting that wood natural element materiality, but still a very clean and simple design, but it provides that wider walkway at the front there. It does provide you a space where, you can imagine somebody putting a rug out front or even a couple chairs out front and really activating this as a front porch, if you will. And then this is that same kind of user experience on the ground level of one of the other buildings. And again, even with the stairs, when they're tucked in parallel, making sure that they're open and visible and that there isn't, like if even walking through here, you're never going to be kind of like startled by someone hiding behind a corner, or feel like that there's an area that's unsafe, even in the kind of more narrow spaces. And then from an interior perspective on the units, we did give, we provided two separate palettes, and again, focusing on providing a natural material or texture, along with a little bit of color in the space. We didn't want to go so far that people didn't feel like they could still make it their own, but we did want to kind of bring in that trauma-informed design lens to the interiors of the units. The unit on the right that you're seeing that's in the green and darker wood tone, the walnut tone, that actually is one of those townhouse units. So that's, you're seeing the stair going upstairs to the bedroom areas up above. And then the unit on the left is kind of our blue toned unit. And I put some of those images in there to kind of highlight that all of the ground floor units, and actually almost all units or most units, have sliding glass doors that go out onto a balcony or an outdoor space. So everybody has a private outdoor area to utilize. And then additionally, there's some bike parking that we also provided, a shelf up above where the bike parking mount would happen inside the unit, and then providing like a little wing wall to kind of stitch that behind. And then I'll talk a little bit about the community building and show you some images of that. When we're talking about bringing people together, it was really important to make sure that the space was as flexible as possible, because we heard from the housing authority that they wanted to be able to like host anything from, a bridal shower or birthday party to cooking lessons. They wanted teenagers to have a space that they could go in and study after school, especially when maybe they've got, quite a few people living in the unit and they can't find a quiet space within their apartment, that they have a space that is safe and quiet for them to go at the community building. There's also not a lot of resources for folks to be able to host, those community type meetings like AA meetings or other kind of community gatherings. So having a multi-purpose room that can function as a meeting space, or it can also function as an art room space, that they can kind of bring folks in to provide that. And then the building also served, as Nate mentioned, there was a Head Start preschool kind of daycare area. and then some leasing offices and offices. So I'll kind of walk through the building through photos to kind of explain it a little bit more directly. But um, the building is kind of wrapped. One thing you'll notice here is that we do have the mural on the common building, and that's been inspired by kind of the local flora and fauna around the area, and that wraps around to the front door. And so the front door that kind of faces the Q Street or the main entry vehicular access to the project here is on the front of the building. And then as you go into the space, we provided some soft seating with acoustic panels at the entry there. So there's kind of a landing pad, if you will, if you're waiting to meet with somebody in the leasing office, or maybe you're waiting for somebody to come out of the Head Start space. There's kind of a little landing zone there. And the murals actually then continued into the inside of the building. If you want to go back one more, I'll just mention we often utilize wood slat walls as a way to define space and create a sense of privacy, but also give visual transparency. So the offices are actually behind that wood slat wall that you're seeing there. So if somebody were to come in and be sitting out front, and they have their office door open, they'd be able to actually see them from their offices, but still have a little bit of that kind of screen or sense of privacy. And you're getting a hint of it here, but you'll see it in the next slide. The artist that did the mural, maybe it's actually the slide after. I'll get to it in a second. But the muralist that did the both of the murals also provided some large panel hung canvas artwork for the space, which we think really brings it to life. The space on the left that you're seeing is the that common meeting room flexible space. So this can function as a meeting room. It can function as an art room. It's got like a pinup tack board. It's got, again, you're seeing that wood being brought in an intentional way. And then actually you're not seeing it in the photo, but behind you in this photo would be a counter with some sinks and stuff to be able to really function as an art space as well. You're seeing us use things like just leaving the concrete exposed and grinding and sealing that, polishing that. So that's, highly durable. And then all of the furniture, both in this space and throughout the remaining areas, are all very flexible and movable. They can stack and fold down, and they match from space to space. So if you need more tables, you can bring them out of this room, or if you needed more tables in this room, you can bring them from the other space. But just from an interiors perspective, trying to create as much flexibility as possible, the way that the spaces can be used. And then the space on the right is that learning lounge, creating little kind of desk nooks for people to do some focused work at, as well as some soft seating and gathering spaces for people to use. And then this is the hallway that I was kind of alluding to, where you've got that kind of canvas artwork that's going down the hallway and providing a little bit of soft seating right outside that Head Start space. And then we focused on providing kind of an all-user toilet and kind of sink area for the entire building utilizes one kind of common all-user restroom. And then the main space in here is ultimately a large open flexible space with a kitchen in it. But you'll see, as we'll highlight here in a second, is that there's actually quite a few little pockets of soft seating and gathering space, as well as that same kind of flexible furniture that I mentioned. And that way they can kind of orient it in any way that they see fit. It does have quite a bit of acoustic panels on the walls, and then a really beautiful kind of highly focus on movement and color mural that the same artist created for us inside this space. And then those are the kind of pocket seating areas that people can kind of break out into. And then the kitchen, which is again bringing in some of those trauma-informed palette, the light blues that are calming, as well as the natural elements and natural tones. And the kitchen can be used as a teaching kitchen if they want to. They can host cooking classes here, but it's not necessarily, we're not doing like a full commercial scale kitchen here, but it is really meant to provide a space for residents to be able to come in and utilize the kitchen and this entire area for, large events. And they've already hosted several, which has been fun to see. And then there's a large garage door that actually opens this space up to the exterior, which is connected to kind of a play area, the Head Start play area, and a kind of a covered gathering space. And you're seeing one of those events here in the photo with, kids have already drawn all over the concrete with some chalk, and they're playing out front as their folks are inside meeting. And then adjacent to that's just outside that covered area is a basketball court, and you're seeing to the right the Head Start play area, which I didn't quite capture a photo that shows the kind of play area there, but there is some kind of um, program play structure for that Head Start to the right.
All right, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, there's a lot to the design and that we're pretty proud of, and they'll definitely welcome questions at the end if anything you're more curious about. So I'll try to kind of run through more of the background as quickly as I can about the sort of 2030 challenge commitment aspect of the project from an energy standpoint. So I won't go too much into the background of carbon, but we know we've got a lot to do to kind of improve the built environment. And it's challenging to do with affordable housing projects because they're always budget challenged. But we, want to do our part on every single project. So, um, we'll go through kind of ways we were thinking about that. We're definitely not to regenerative design yet, but this project was part of a cohort with the Living Future Institute of other affordable housing projects that are also trying to do the most that we can. And ILFI they've put in a lot to help support our team and just kind of doing those deep dives about what's possible, how can we get there. So, we're still in this high performance zone and we need to be moving into regenerative design as quickly as possible as an industry. And so this is all kind of incrementally working towards that. And I think that's really what the jurors for this AIA award recognized in this project, is just trying to move that direction as quick as we can. So our decarbonization really focused on, energy use and somewhat on embodied carbon, but mostly on energy use. And that's partly because one of the big things that the client was focused on is really reducing costs for residents. So that means they wanted to do owner paid utilities, and there's not a lot of operational budget for affordable housing projects. So the best way to help them achieve both of those or work with both of those constraints is to get net zero energy and hopefully even a little bit net positive, which we'll kind of speak to. And some of the best ways to do that, especially for a project like this where you've got more low-rise buildings and a large site, is maximize solar, because now the cost of solar and the benefit it provides is pretty immense, and it's the first and best thing to maximize before you even look at efficiency when cost is the main driver. So that's just something that we did. So there's a great partnership with Fleet Development, who really knows how to maximize tax credits and other incentives, because we were not in a normal ETO kind of incentive region for this project. So there were multiple challenges on that front that I won't get into, but anyway, maximizing solar was still really key to this. So that was part of the roof design that Andrea kind of talked about, sort of. So we really tried to prioritize how do we get all these south-facing, west-east facing roofs that still kind of fit the aesthetic we're going for. Another key to this is not doing any combustion, so no natural gas or fossil fuels were on the project. Those are definite carbon emitters. And yeah, here we go. You're seeing all the solar again. I think Andrea showed this earlier. So if you go all electric, then your next best move is to use heat pumps for every possible system that you can. And thankfully, technology is coming along. So we utilized central ducted mini split heat pumps. So these are still air source because ground source heat pumps are still quite expensive, even though this would have been a good climate for it. But these have gotten really good, and it's also really important in a climate like La Grande, where you've got a lot of, it can get hot in the summer, it can get quite cold in the winter. And so really making sure that you've got a system that can meet all those demands and keep people comfortable, especially people with vulnerabilities health-wise. And so coupling in excellent ventilation is a key part of that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but basically we're ducting conditioned air to every room. And then we have heat pump water heaters as well as heat pump clothes dryers. That one's a big leap for a lot of projects. It was in this case too. We still believe in the technology, but there's some challenges there to definitely, with both water heaters and dryers, to kind of be aware of. There's also just with heat pumps, all of these little outdoor units and trying to figure out what to do with them, how to work them into the landscape and the design of the building in a cost-effective way, but also, hopefully somewhat aesthetically pleasing way. So that can be a challenge too, something really to think about. And if we'd had more budget, we'd done even more screening and things like that. But we think once the landscape grows up, these will pretty much tuck away. Um, so I think this. Oh, whoops! I just skipped to the end and didn't mean to do that. Apologies. See if I can. There we go. Push the wrong button. Okay, so yeah, and then one of the buildings we also did a centralized CO2 based heat pump water heater system. And we did this because the utility wanted to get some data on these versus the other types of water heaters that go in each unit. And so we had both the single unit in most of the dwelling units, and then the centralized system for one building with that had the community building and 8 one-bedroom units. So to see what the comparative data is once they collect all of that. So ventilation is really key, especially with affordable housing, where you've got vulnerable populations, you've got lots of wildfire smoke risk that's getting worse and worse. Allergens are affecting people more and more because we're getting kind of immune compromised and because of a lot of kind of just toxic exposure that we have in our modern age. And so being able to do great filtration and then making sure you're getting fresh air to every bedroom is really important. So we coupled that up with our heating and cooling system and provided MERV 13 filters, which you can this is a great chart to just kind of see what that does for you. HEPA filters, as everybody knows, are kind of the best, but they're also really expensive to replace and require equipment that can deal with that incredible resistance. So we didn't get quite to HEPA, but it is an option if you've got folks who really need that. So for solar, we have a maximized solar array that has about a 7-year payback, and so it will become an income generator for the project after year 7, which is going to be really amazing for supporting where the budgets of maintaining these projects are very, very lean. This just gets into some of the actual cost numbers to show that. And then after solar, we look at and systems. The next best cost-effective thing is air tightness. So we just really looked at how do we detail that, make sure the contractor knows that air tightness is a major goal. And so in this project, we started with kind of conventional means, but we had a really aggressive air tightness goal that we weren't sure if we could hit with conventional, just caulking and other kind of standard methods. And so we also ended up using aero barrier, which is basically they spray a sealant into the air. They pressurize the building, spray the sealant into the air as like a mist, and it finds all the little cracks and crevices and seals it up tight. So that worked really well to get us fantastic air tightness number. Yeah, and we also did advanced framing and things to increase insulation and added extra insulation in the attics because that's super easy to do. It's a low cost benefit. We had improved windows, but chasing insulation is just usually not your best cost effective measure. So we didn't do really expensive wall systems or things like that because they just didn't have the sort of cost benefit that we needed for the project budget, especially going through COVID and many cost escalations that we were having to deal with. But the core elements of net zero energy stayed because you know, owner paid utilities stayed, and so these priorities kind of followed all the way through. And we could talk more later if folks have questions about some of the detailing and lessons learned that we had around achieving air tightness. We also wanted the housing authority really did want to kind of support the local economy as much as possible. So there were a lot of efforts that coincided with sustainability of getting materials sourced locally, construction labor locally, you know, making the most of every material. So using concrete as your finish where you have it, minimizing the amount of concrete. So we did framed crawl space floors instead of slab on grade to reduce concrete, which has a high carbon content. You know, advanced framing and just being lean with our finishes is a big part of sort of the carbon reduction strategy. So you can see here, there's a lot less concrete to just do the perimeter. And we still were able to kind of achieve accessibility and all those goals. There's a few places where they didn't quite understand the goal with framing, and we have way more wood there, which creates thermal bridging and some wastefulness in terms of materials. But we learned some lessons about how to kind of communicate some of those goals with framers who aren't totally used to that as well. And so once some of those things became understood, you can see that we got a pretty kind of lean set of wall framing. And then also, yeah, trying to be as efficient as we can with those high carbon materials like concrete and paving. So you can see that we're just maximizing the efficiency of all of our paving to do double duty as circulation and parking, and yeah, just trying to be as lean as we can there. We did attempt some things working through that Living Futures partnership. You know, we explored what they call pedal certification, which is kind of partway towards the living building, to try to see if we could achieve that. But again, our kind of budget constraints that came through COVID didn't allow us to get there. But we certainly looked at everything we could do to reduce carbon content and impacts to the project. You know, utilizing wood for stairs instead of steel wherever we could, things like that. There's just some fundamental choices that we can make in materials. And then, yeah, just to kind of bring it back around, that all of this was about, you know, creating spaces for people first and foremost, and that fits the context of the site, the nature of the site, the community culture, which has a lot to do with timber and the mountains. That's kind of the identity of LeGrand. So that's why we really feel like the community embraced this at the end of the day. And there were many comments of like, wow, this affordable housing is nicer than most other housing in town. And we're like, well, yeah, that's the goal. So as Andrea said, just really seeing people utilize it and kind of feel the benefits to life as you can kind of gain social connections to nature as you come and go every day. That just kind of experiential flow was something we thought a lot about, and really think is a special thing about the project. And that's certainly the feedback we've heard already, and we look forward to kind of getting more from the community. This was their kind of opening, grand opening celebration, and you know, the part of our budget challenges, we weren't able to get like all of the ping pong tables and playground equipment and some of that stuff, but you know, grants have already been written and put out there, so we felt bad that some of those nice to have are still coming, but space is there, it's ready for everything. So this flexible space will allow kids to play inside on bad weather days. It's gonna be able to host so many cool events and opportunities for people to connect with each other. So we're just really excited about the potentials and functions of these spaces, and the way that, you know, hopefully people can just mix and be playing checkers together or, whatever kind of ways of kind of connecting with each other in these informal spaces and as they move through the site, that it really feels like a place to belong and not just an affordable housing project. So that's really our goal.
Yeah, and we'll open it up to you all now. I know we kind of flew through a lot of stuff, and hopefully we captured most of our learning objectives there, but we would love to kind of hear your guys' thoughts or if you have any questions or would like any information on any of the things we spoke about. Or you can put them in the chat.
You covered everything.
Great. I should mention, I think Nate kind of alluded to it at the end there, but the project was getting started or about to start construction right as everything shut down for COVID. And I think like anybody that works in this industry can probably attest to, that was a very difficult time to keep projects moving forward because we hadn't quite started yet. They're trying to finalize the GMP budget, and to have the amount of escalation in pricing that we did was substantial. And so I think there was like a true testament to the team, both ourselves, our consultant team, the development team, the ownership. Everybody involved was like so committed to still making this space one of community, one of, high sustainability measures, energy efficiency. And so the project was still able to do a lot, even though it did have to go through some pretty substantial VE and some hard discussions. But at the end of the day, even with those changes, the heart of the project and what it is stayed present throughout the entire thing. And it looks like we do have some questions rolling in.
Yep.
So Rachel asked, do you have your air tightness number available? I might have missed it on the slide.
Yeah, so we targeted 1.5 air changes per hour at ACH 50, which is kind of the older paradigm for the air tightness nerds out there, but it's a pretty aggressive number. It's kind of like um, it's like the extra tier if you're doing LEED certification. So that was what we based our energy model on and wanted to hit. And so with that aero barrier product I described, they can go down and easily hit passive house, but they basically got us to about 1 with their testing. So yeah, pretty impressive. Which isn't quite passive house, but it's close.
Awesome. And then David asked, what was the overall construction budget or cost per unit?
The overall construction budget was 27 million. Divide that by 82 units. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but that's the math. Um, so yeah, and we had this project has a lot of larger units. We didn't mention that, but in urban environments, most projects have like at most a few 2-bedroom units, but here we have a bunch of 2 beds, a lot of 3s, a lot of 4, even a couple of 4 beds.
Yeah.
So
These are definitely family units for
yeah,
sure. And the
exactly.
size even of those family units are larger for this area and kind of working rurally, what someone might expect is going to be a larger unit than what you would typically see in a more urban environment for sure.
Yep.
Andrew says, thanks. Great presentation. Thank you, Andrew. David, were there ERV, HRV units utilized for ventilation due to higher air tightness?
Yeah, so we definitely had ERV units, and those were located in ceiling soffits adjacent to those ducted heat pumps, and they were combined so that that ventilation air gets mixed into the supply air that's heating and cooling the bedrooms and living rooms. So we had that energy recovery ventilation. So even with that, high air tightness, there's still really great ventilation for folks.
Yeah, and I'll provide just a little bit of kind of those lesson learned or things to consider, on a project like this. it was interesting walking through the site. As you know, as I mentioned, people were like moving in phase 1. We're doing punch and kind of still going through stuff on phase 2, and I'm able to kind of walk the site. People are asking me, "What are you doing? Why are you here?" And starting to talk to some of the residents. And one of the things that had come up in some of those discussions was somebody's like frustration that there wasn't a bath fan, and not quite understanding from a user experience that it's continuous ventilation and that you're not going to experience coming in and like flipping on a bath fan in the same traditional sense that you would, that the system is more integrated. And so it's not that there wasn't a bath fan, it's just it's different than what they were used to in their previous apartments. And so that kind of user training and kind of understanding what's been designed and maybe even the why is kind of important. And
Yeah.
oftentimes with housing authorities and nonprofits, you also have a little bit of a higher turnover of some of your facilities folks. You have a higher turnover of some of your staff members. Maybe your on-site leasing person changes over. And so as the project ages, just making sure that that kind of knowledge stays with the project, I would definitely recommend, you know, if you do anything creative, especially when it comes to some of the systems in the project, making sure that the tenants kind of understand how they work, because often they will do things, or maybe a facilities person might swap out a piece of equipment or a light or something, and it ends up not being what you expect, but then it does impact your project overall in the future. So would definitely recommend that.
Those heat pump dryers were definitely a big part of that. It's like, you
Yeah,
know, folks have expectation of being able to dry like a huge load of clothes in less than an hour or something like that. And it's like, okay, you can do that, but at a great cost of energy. And so
yeah.
you know, there's a communication piece that somehow needs to be filled in so folks understand, okay, this dryer is not going to be as fast as I'm used to. It still works, but like here are the things and the whys that like Andrea said. So, you know, those are some things we definitely recommend, you know, communicating thoroughly about if you're going to use these things on projects. Even just the like tiny little background noise that the heat pump water heaters make, and the fact that they blow a little bit of cool air into your little unit entry area or wherever you tuck that closet. It's like folks can definitely live with it, but they ask and they want to know what's going on here, why is this happening?
Or
So
if they haven't experienced it before, they think it's
yeah,
broken. And so
yeah,
then
exactly.
then it's coming as a place of a complaint versus understanding what the system is and actually being like proud of like, oh, my unit is super efficient and check out this cool technology that I have and why it is the way that it is. So I think just making
Yeah,
sure that the narrative and the dialogue is open and communicative, so that way folks do understand it and then they can take more ownership of it and be excited about it versus complaining that it's not working because that's not what they expected. It's like it's the expectation, I guess, right?
yeah,
And I think that's the rest of the questions, unless anybody has anything else. Thank you all for joining us today and letting us brag about our project a little bit with y'all. It's always fun to get to the end and actually have something that we're all excited to talk about. And we definitely appreciate AIA Oregon for the award. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting. This was a great presentation. Very, very
yeah.
interesting.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Have a great day, y'all.